Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be finishing off my three-part, I don't know if I'd call it an analysis, or at the very least a discussion, or it's my opinions on all of the information that we got from this past week's Pokemon Direct, talking about Pokemon Sword and Shield. And we got a lot of information, so make sure to check out my two previous videos. I will leave them in the description and maybe make a card for one or two of them. But definitely check those out because I have some thoughts about the Pokemon that were revealed and the characters that were revealed. In any event, this video I'm going to be talking about kind of more miscellaneous stuff, but like mostly the features and mechanics that they talked about, and we have some very interesting things to talk about. So as I look at my list of things that I have written down here, I kind of made it in probably the most interesting down to the less interesting. Well, it depends on what your opinions are on the subjects. However, I guess I'll just go with what it is. So first of all, we're going to talk about Dynomax. That is a new mechanic. It's basically this generation's Mega Evolution or Z-Moves or whatever. So basically the gist of it is in very specific situations, in gyms or very specific locations, including certain events that I'll talk about in a moment, you can basically make your Pokemon grow. Just like Rita from Power Rangers makes her monster grow, you're making your monster grow. In a lot of ways, this kind of reminds me of Totem Pokemon, only much bigger. And in those cases with Totem Pokemon, they were a little bigger. They were just naturally bigger anyways, because I think it was supposed to be like, oh, bigger, stronger Pokemon from the wild. But they're bigger. They get stat buffs. We don't know exactly what the extent of which these stat buffs are, but presumably all stats get boosted, as well as their moves becoming much more powerful. But they kind of get like shoehorned into very specific things, like electric type moves at the very least get turned into a max lightning strike or something, and then status moves get turned into max guard. So it becomes very, very specific as far as attacks go, but your Pokemon becomes much more powerful. They also become massive, and I think part of the reason why they chose this overall general idea is that the Pokemon are kind of kaiju-like at that point, or giant monsters. Like they're basically Godzilla at that point. So I think they're drawing inspiration from giant monsters fighting each other. Now, with all of that said, it seems kind of like a broken mechanic if I left it at that. Pokemon becoming just super powerful, its moves getting super powerful buffs to itself. You'd think that that's pretty much a guaranteed win, but not necessarily. There is one drawback that they mentioned, and that it only lasts for 3 turns. So you really have to decide when you want to use it, and if you don't use it at the right time, or your opponent outlasts your Dynomax, basically you're screwed. So it definitely does take some planning and finesse to use. So it's a really interesting idea and a really interesting concept as a whole. It's certainly something that we haven't seen before, and honestly, I think there might be more to it. There's plenty of rumors that seem to suggest that there's something else in the game that they certainly have not touched on yet. So I think that Dynomax will definitely have a place as far as the mechanics go, but there might be something more to it that they haven't told us yet. The next thing I want to talk about is the max raid battles, and I wanted to talk about the Dynomax feature prior to this because this is basically a fight against a Pokemon that's Dynamaxing all the way through the entire battle. So, as the name suggests, it is literally a raid battle. You, along with 3 of your friends or 3 computer-generated players, or honestly probably strangers too, can go up against a giant Dynamaxed out Pokemon, and you have to work with your teammates. Some Pokemon might want to focus on defense and healing, while others focus on attack. And on top of that, only one of you, one of the 4 players, can use Dynamax themselves, so you have to really decide, hey, who's going to be the one to do it. In order to get into these max raid battles, you have to go up to these kind of like pedestal tablet things that are kind of peppered all across, at the very least, the wild area, but I have a feeling that they'll probably be all across the entire region. So basically you see these waypoints that shoot up into the sky, and you go there and you either team up with your friends or with some strangers online, or you can even go by yourself, and you can take on these max raid battle bosses essentially. And it's honestly really cool of an idea. They've never done raid battles like this in a main series Pokemon game, and I think it's a welcome addition, and certainly will allow people to connect with one another and have a lot more going on throughout the game as they're playing, as well as after the game when they beat it. Also, on top of that, it sounds like some Pokemon won't appear in the wild until you beat their max raid boss. So, let's say, I think they show a Quagsire or something like that. Maybe you can't catch a Quagsire until you beat the max raid battle with it, and then they'll start popping up all across the Galar region, which is a really cool thing. I hope there's a little more incentive to do these, but honestly, it gives you great incentive to do these, even if you're by yourself, to complete the decks and among other things. Again, it's a really cool feature along with the Dynomax mechanic. It's just, I think it'll be a really awesome thing for people to play with, whether you know them or not. One thing to remember is that if you do want to play it online, you will need the Nintendo Online service, so it's not that bad, honestly. It's like, what, $20 a year? It might be worth it if you are thinking about doing it. If you don't want to pay that, that's cool too, because apparently if you go in alone, you basically just have 3 other NPCs generated to help you out. So either way, you could play it and it'll be great. The next thing I want to talk about is the wild area that I mentioned. It is basically just a sprawling landscape in the middle of the Galar region. Well, at the very least, it's the main part is in the Galar region. And I say the main part because honestly, we don't know for sure whether it's just this one part that they're mentioning as the wild area, quote unquote, or whether it's just all routes are kind of similar to this and this is just the bigger part of it. But I'm going to focus on what they showed. And this is just the giant landscape where it's fields and lakes just all over the place. And honestly, the map doesn't do it justice because it is so big. And apparently this general area is where the most Pokemon, at the very least the biggest variety of Pokemon you will find in the region compared to any other single route. And that's because not only are there just Pokemon that will just probably appear no matter what, but then there's also Pokemon that appear depending on what part of the wilds that you're even in. So if you're in the north, some Pokemon might appear up there that they don't appear in the bottom half of the wilds. And on top of that, if the weather changes, and it changes daily, by the way, so everything's different every single day. So depending on what the weather is, Pokemon might show up that they might not have shown up in other days. So on one day it might be snowing and you'll see a bunch of Snover and Avalugg and whatnot showing up. And the next day it might be a hot sunny day and you'll see, I don't know, any other Pokemon. Pokemon that don't live in hot sunny days you will not see. Either way, you will see a ton of Pokemon and I'm super stoked for that. Honestly, this giant area shows just how big the Galar region is because it's a small part comparatively on the map. Like, it's a pretty big part, honestly, but like, theoretically it is a small part of the map compared to like, oh, the entire top half or an entire bottom half. But when you see it in game, it is massive. And for good reason, too, because it just shows that the entire region is so big. Way bigger than people ever thought it was going to be. And on top of that, it seems like this area will be kind of traversed multiple times throughout the game. So you'll constantly be coming and going and coming back and finding brand new stuff every time you do come back. I do believe that the Galar region will be much more fluid than people originally gave it credit for. There's definitely going to be a lot of exploration going on based on just the wild area that we saw. Now, those are all the big things that I wanted to touch on as far as what we saw in the direct and on the trailer, but there's a few other things that I do want to touch on. First being is that, well, you have a Rotom Dex again. Hopefully this time much less annoying. I feel bad for saying that because I honestly think that Rotom Dex in Generation 7 meant well, but it was really kind of annoying. So in this game, though, you have Rotom Phone, which essentially is your Rotom Dex. It might have other features, but it's basically just the Pokedex. But beyond that, it does have some other features that they barely touched on just a little bit. And that involves the next thing I want to talk about. The bike is back, but it seems like it has a lot more features itself, and that includes attaching to the Rotom Phone to make it kind of go faster or change form, maybe? It seems like they're trying to make the bike another form of transportation that kind of, again, keeps HMs out of the games. So in this, not only can you just ride it like a regular bike and then attach the Rotom Phone to make it go faster, but it also can go over water, eliminating the need for any kind of surf mechanic at all. So not even riding on top of a Lapras like in Sun and Moon. I think that there are a few more details about the bike that we haven't learned about, but it's certainly, it's welcome to come back. And while it's not the most interesting feature, it's certainly cool to have around, I guess. And the final thing that I want to talk about is camera control. So they talk about it mainly in the context of a wild area, but I get the feeling that there will be some camera control throughout the entire Galar region. It's just that the most wide area, which is the wild area, gives you the most freedom with it. This has never been in a Pokemon game ever before, and I'm super stoked for it. It'll really add some depth to the game, and especially if the region itself is so big, I'm stoked. Oh, one more thing. The battle UI looks hot. I actually really like all the menus that they showed in the game. We didn't get a whole huge look at it, but from what we saw, really good looking. The entire game just looks so good, and they clearly upgraded the graphics a little bit. Maybe the textures here and there. It certainly looks cleaner since the initial trailer. I'm stoked for this game. Honestly, this has the potential to be my favorite Pokemon game out of all of them, and I probably say that every time a new Pokemon game comes out, but this is really showing that there's a lot to the game, and based on rumors that we have floating around, including potentially real leaks, it seems like this game is going to be one of the biggest things in the world, and essentially the Breath of the Wild of Pokemon. Well, that's all I gotta say about everything that we saw in the Pokemon Direct this week. And if you want to see all my comments on the Pokemon that we saw in the Direct, as well as the characters that we saw, I'll leave a link again in the description for both of those videos, as well as maybe a card somewhere around here. And yeah, make sure to go check those out. Also, if I missed anything, let me know down below in the comments section. Sometimes I miss things, I don't know. Also, let me know what you guys think about all of these new features and just the overall look of the game. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. That way you'll get notifications whenever I upload. Well, that's it for me. I will see you guys in another video. So long!